Beijing, the modern-day capital of China, has a population of around 9 million people and covers an area approximately the same size as Belgium. In 1949, it was in Tiananmen Square that Mao proclaimed the foundation of the People's Republic, and his portrait still gazes down over the square, which was specifically enlarged to hold up to 1 million people for rallies. Lying on the northwestern edge of the North China Plain, within the barrier of the Great Wall, Beijing was the bastion of Chinese imperial power for almost 700 years. In the centre of the square is an obelisk dedicated to the heroes of the nation. To the west, the Great Hall of the People. To the east, the Museum of Chinese History. And to the south, the Mao Mausoleum. It is not hard to have preconceived ideas about Tiananmen Square, but all thoughts of tanks must be replaced, for now you are more likely to see a kite being flown than an anti-government banner. On the north side of the square is the main entrance to the Imperial Palace. Completed in 1421, it was used during the reign of 24 emperors until the last emperor Puyi. The Imperial Palace, like many wealthy traditional Chinese homes and compounds, follows a grid pattern. The most important buildings are laid out on a central north-south axis. Behind walls more than 30 foot high and within a broad moat, life in the Imperial Palace was dictated by complex rules and rituals. Over 8,000 rooms were home to not only the emperor and his family, but various maids, concubines, and as many as 3,000 eunuchs. Nicknamed the Forbidden City because entrance was denied to ordinary people, most commoners would have been executed on the spot just for being here. Now you can join the other 1 million tourists that visit here every year, and who, led by flag-waving tour guides, are massing ranks to view its treasures. Great halls surround the courtyard of the outer area, a courtyard which could hold 90,000 spectators. The Hall of Supreme Harmony, the largest building in the palace, is the first and most impressive of these. In its centre is the dragon throne from which the emperor ruled. Shishan Ling, or Ming tombs in English, are the last resting place for 13 of the 16 Ming emperors who ruled from 1368 to 1644. The only tomb to have been fully excavated is that of Emperor Wanli. The long pathway along the valley floor is flanked by human figures representing civil and military dignitaries, along with lions, horses, camels, elephants, and mythical creatures. Wan, the Chinese character for the number 10,000, is also a synonym for unimaginable hugeness. Thus, Wan Li Chang Cheng, the Chinese name for the Great Wall. Soldiers and peasants from all parts of the country were conscripted, spending several years of their lives heaving the huge blocks of stone up the steep slopes. The top of the wall was designed so that 5 or 6 horsemen could ride side by side, and fortified towers at intervals served as beacon towers or garrisons to the soldiers. Nowadays, the towers are an essential resting place. The steps are uneven in size, one time 2 inches, then maybe 18 inches, making it hard going to conquer the steep climb. Following the contours of the land, the wall crosses numerous high peaks and valleys, winding its way from the Yellow Sea to the Gobi Desert. Opinions differ as to whether it can be seen from space, but it is magnificent and everything you could imagine. The brave and hardy not only climb up, but also have to climb down, which is almost as difficult. However, here at Badaling, they have now installed a slide to aid the descent for the less energetic. Any organised tour of China has to include visits to several official state-owned enterprises. The government view seems to be that the official tour groups are easily controlled, won't mix with ordinary Chinese, and are willing to pay more. Although the range of factories and shops are well chosen and interesting in the main, it would have been nice to be let loose in the markets and general stores.
One, two, three, four, five, six, seven.
Oh, look at that.
Many pearls. There are about 20 pearls inside. Because somebody put the small pieces into here.
Oh, look at the other
pieces.
ones. Over here too, right? Over there?
This color not too much. The price for the pearls, the shape and the color, all is natural. It's forever. The ocean pearl use sand, so the ocean pearl bigger.
Gonna have that one?
Yeah.
Okay, I have that one.
Hello. After we get pearl, we can see how to make the hole. Here. Here we use this machine for making hole. Now I put the pearl into this here. Make the hole.
The Peking opera is a fascinating spectacle with little in common with Western opera. An ingenious and colourful combination of traditional music, poetry, singing, dancing, acrobatics and martial arts. Words are both spoken in stylized form or sung in high pitch. Although the spectacle is impressive, the reaction of the native audience is even more fascinating. The more seemingly unmelodious and piercing the part, the more the audience howled its approval. From a part of an itinerary thought of as avoid at all costs, it became a wouldn't have missed it for the world. Suzhou is about 1 hour's train journey from Shanghai. Considered one of China's most charming cities, its fame rests on its silk and its gardens, both of which still flourish. Built on a network of canals to control the Yangtze floodwaters, its subsequent prosperity was brought about by the construction of the Grand Canal and the growth of the silk industry. Many wealthy retired mandarins spent their last years in Suzhou and are largely responsible for its historic villas and gardens. The town has a great many and are considered works of art in themselves, with grand names such as Garden of the Master of Fishing Nets, Garden of the Humble Administrator. No one knows the precise date of the discovery of silk, but Chinese tradition ascribes it to Empress Shi Ling, who in the year 2640 BC harnessed the natural skills of the silkworm for the advantage of mankind. The Chinese kept the secret for 3,000 years until cunning missionaries exported it throughout the West and the Orient. Farmers breed the silkworms, the caterpillar of a moth native to China. One moth may lay up to 500 eggs, which are hatched in incubators. The caterpillar is interested only in feeding. Mulberry leaves are their preferred diet, supplied to them every 3 or 4 hours. After 5 weeks they have grown to 7 centimeters, reject food and become restless, a sign they are ready to make their cocoons. Once at the factory, the cocoons are sorted to reject any that are flawed, and the remainder are then steamed to kill the live chrysalis. The cocoons are immersed in hot water to loosen the threads, which are then extracted from the water and reeled together as one by machine. The threads from 6 or 7 cocoons are needed to produce a fibre strong enough for weaving. From here the silk goes to dyeing factories and then to weaving factories to be made into cloth or carpets or the production of silk embroidery. The most famous institute which specializes in the production of silk embroidery is in Suzhou. With nearby Lake Tai, the third largest lake in China, the Grand Canal flowing north-south through the city, and the Yangtze River and Chengdu Canal looping around the inner city, it is no wonder it has been called the Venice of the East. A cruise along the Grand Canal is one of the easiest and best ways of seeing what makes China tick. In half a day you can travel between Suzhou and Wuxi through a jostling, floating hubbub that has barely changed for 1,000 years. The canal, which in part dates back to 400 BC, is still the world's largest man-made waterway. One of the features of the Grand Canal is the string of barges following each other nose to tail. In the past, entire families lived aboard, but apparently nowadays factories own most of the boats and provide flats for the boatmen. However, judging by the family atmosphere on some of the barges, it seems likely that the new liberal approach to the economy is encouraging the re-emergence of old habits. The early sections were built in the north for the movement of troops, but it was the Emperor Yangdi who undertook the construction with the labour of 5.5 million conscripted men. His aim was to link his two capitals, but decided to extend it so as to connect the four major trading rivers, the Yangtze, the Yellow, the Qingtang and the Hui, thus linking the Rice Bowl of China with the more populated north. Shanghai is a legend. In its colonial days it was called the Paris of the East. Today the government intends it to be their Hong Kong, whatever the cost. In the shadows of the tower blocks you can still find a China where life goes on as it has for thousands of years. At the bird and flower market there is more than a few surprises, some of which you may not feel entirely comfortable with. This is the city centre market. Around the corner are some of the most amazing buildings you have ever seen, while in the market caterpillars crawl out of their cocoons. Shanghai is being transformed for the 21st century. Little of the old dwellings remain, and are disappearing fast against the rushing tide of change. Foreign investment, much of it from overseas Chinese, is giving Shanghai a spectacular skyline. The Jade Buddha temple is less than 100 years old, but has a very attractive restored main hall and the Jade Buddha itself, which was brought back from Burma by a local abbot. At the heart of the old city, the Yuyuan Gardens is one of the few old tourist sites left in the city. Since the 18th century, the complex, with its traditional red walls and upturned tiled roofs, has been a social centre and marketplace. At its centre, the Huxing Ting Tea House, the city's oldest tea house, sits in the middle of a small lake, whose famous zigzag bridge leads directly to Yuyuan. The city's old racecourse has now made way for a park and the impressive new Museum of Art and History. It houses a fine collection on several floors, showing treasures from all over China. The Bund, a 1-kilometre stretch along the banks of the Huangpu River, is regarded as the heart of the city. It consists almost entirely of pre-20th century buildings of a grand style. This was the area of foreign concession. The British, Americans and French dominated commerce and industry, amassing huge fortunes until kicked out in 1949. Across the river from the Bund, a special economic zone is being built. Called the Pudong New Area, a massive $40 billion is being invested. Nearby, Nanjing Road cuts through the city. Once a cobbled thoroughfare, it is now being restyled yet again, but now for the 21st century. The opulent villas of the foreign residents are now grand department stores with a huge variety of merchandise, making it one of the busiest streets in China. But it is the Bund that remains the focus of Shanghai. By night, the contrast between traditional and modern is even more breathtaking. Shanghai has always been the black sheep of the family, and during the 30s had a decadent reputation. Now the city has once again found its dancing shoes, and from modern bars and restaurants to traditional shows offers it all. The neon signs give a feeling of what it may have been like in the pre-war boom. A city with more stores, more consumer goods, more private businesses and far more fashionable character than any other in China. And for the visitor, it is the perfect place to start or finish a grand China tour.